But I could show my prowess, be a lion, not a mouse, if I only had the nerve.
Let the pounding of our hearts cry, we will serve the Lord. We were made to be courageous, and we're taking back.
Hello viewers, and welcome to the second installment of my review of the Be Courageous 2018 Convention of Jehovah's Witnesses. So in this video I will be dealing with the video material being shown to Jehovah's Witnesses on the Saturday of their 3-day convention. So without further ado, let's roll the first clip.
In 1998, I started dating a girl, and we dated for 2 years. During that time, I also started studying the Bible. Our relationship was going well. We didn't have any big issues. We got along well, rarely argued. So then, how do you go to someone when you're dating and everything's going well and you say, listen, I can see you don't feel the same as I do. I don't want to date you anymore because now I'm studying the Bible. I want to be one of Jehovah's Witnesses. I really had to muster up a lot of courage to tell her that. But there are moments when you start to ask yourself, did I really make the right decision? And up to around the time when I got baptized, I was still hoping that she would learn the truth. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. I was also involved in something else that I really loved, which was sports. When I was younger, I was part of a track and field team, and I participated in many local 5 and 10K competitions. Some who trained with me at the time went on to become professional athletes. Some even competed in the Olympics. I knew I had a decision to make. It wouldn't be possible for me to keep training for track and field while trying to serve Jehovah. So I had to have enough courage to speak to my coach. And after that, I gave up being an athlete. Looking back now, it wasn't easy to leave those things behind. But what Jehovah has given me today is much more valuable than anything I gave up. I have the privilege of serving in Bethel together with my wife, who also gives her all in Jehovah's service. I can honestly say that I am truly happy serving Jehovah with all my heart.
So bear in mind, the video we've just seen is the first video that's shown on the Saturday morning of the convention. It's shown in a symposium item. The symposium is called Be a Courageous, and then this particular talk is Be a Courageous Bible Student. Now, if I were attending this convention as an impartial observer, someone who was just interested in knowing more about Jehovah's Witnesses, what I would take away from this video is, all right, if I become a Jehovah's Witness, I have to ditch my girlfriend if she won't agree to join the religion with me. And I also can't be involved in competitive sports. Straight away, these should be red flags that we're dealing with a controlling cult that micromanages people's lives to the extent that you're not allowed to get involved in competitive sports, and you're not allowed to have a relationship with someone outside the faith.
My classmates and teachers always respected me, but this year things were different. My class was organizing a Christmas party. I was asked to help, but I refused. My classmates and even my teacher made fun of me. I went to see the principal because I thought he would understand me, but unfortunately he didn't. I felt I had been treated unfairly. After the conversation, I went home and immediately started to pray. I felt that the most important thing I could do was to uphold Jehovah's reputation. For personal study, I considered the Young People Ask book, chapter 20, How Can I Get Along with My Teacher? It contained Matthew 7:12, which says that you should treat others the way you want to be treated. And that was just what I needed. It showed how important it was to respect people even if they're not nice to you. So, I decided to explain my position to the class. I raised my hand and asked whether I could explain my position. My teacher surprisingly agreed. One classmate raised his hand, and after I had answered his question, another one, and so on. Others entered the classroom, students, teachers, and even the principal came in and sat down. Afterwards, the principal had me come to his office. I was really scared. I thought I was in trouble. And finally he stood up, shook my hand and apologized. I was walking home with this big smile when I met a classmate who had so many questions. I answered them, and before I knew it, I was able to start a Bible study with him at school. Through prayer and personal study, I developed the courage to uphold Jehovah's name.
So this is an interesting story. What we have here, as far as I'm concerned, is an aborted persecution narrative. Witnesses who are watching this are supposed to feel sorry for Fabio and are supposed to feel as though Satan's system of things will not waste a single opportunity to oppose and oppress Jehovah's people. Only what happens here, of course, is that Fabio's teacher and head teacher change their minds and realise that perhaps they could show a little bit more sensitivity to a child who is quite clearly, I mean, I would say being raised in a cult, but let's be diplomatic, a child who is in a religious minority. If they are genuinely distressed at the prospect of taking part in a class activity that goes against their beliefs, you don't force them to do it. Thankfully, in this case, common sense prevails and Fabio's teacher and head teacher end up apologising to him, which was the right thing for them to do. But I don't see how Watchtower can jump up and down about this story as though it really proves anything. All it proves is that teachers and head teachers sometimes deal with Jehovah's Witness children poorly. And I couldn't help but notice when Fabio is dealing with this whole issue, he goes home and he reads Matthew 7 verse 12, and his conclusion from reading this verse is that we should respect people even if they're not nice to you. So as far as he was concerned, he had a role to play. He needed to respect his classmates and his teacher, even though they weren't being nice to him. If you're attending this convention as someone who's never been one of Jehovah's Witnesses, you could be thinking, oh, well, that's good. They're teaching their young ones to respect people. What's not to like about that? Well, I find it a bit hypocritical because all Jehovah's Witnesses pray every day for the imminent destruction of everybody who is an unbeliever. I don't find that particularly respectful, so I think that the message here is quite hypocritical. It simply cannot be said that Jehovah's Witnesses truly respect people who disagree with them, who see things differently, who don't follow their faith, because they genuinely crave for the day to come when all of these people will be destroyed.
I thought that only those with an abundance of mature knowledge and experience did special metropolitan public witnessing. I thought, I can't do it. I'm too young. Still, I decided to send in the application. I received the invitation in the mail within a month. I suddenly felt really insecure and afraid. So I prayed to Jehovah, I can't do this yet. I thought I wouldn't be able to participate in this type of service feeling that way. So I prayerfully did research to find some material that would help me. I found an article about Moses. It was an article that stressed that even if we think we aren't able to carry out an assignment, with Jehovah's power we can. I also heard a talk that used Jeremiah 20 verse 7. I was encouraged when it said, even though you might feel you can't do something, if Jehovah gives you the power to do it, then you can do it. Actually, Jehovah saw my potential and gave me the courage to perform this service. even though I thought it was beyond my ability. I am being shown time and time again that Jehovah draws people who are sincerely interested in the Bible to the cards. I've even experienced helping people make a request for a Bible study using my smartphone. I'm really able to grow thanks to this ministry and gain more joy from Jehovah than I ever thought possible.
We are introduced to Haruka, who has this huge dilemma about whether she is worthy enough to participate in the special metropolitan work. Now, this is interesting because, well, first of all, it's kind of a first world problem. I'm sure that there are people, even in the audience, who are dealing with bigger problems in life than whether they're worthy enough to essentially stand next to a cart in a major city. But I do just want to draw your attention to an article I wrote about the special metropolitan witnessing back in May of 2014. This is obviously for jwsurvey.org. The article is called "So, How Were You Rated? Elders Rate Pioneers from A to E for Metropolitan Witnessing." And I should just clarify, metropolitan witnessing is for designated major cities. So it's not necessarily, when you see Jehovah's Witnesses stood next to carts, it might not be that they're involved necessarily in metropolitan witnessing. It's only if you're in a major city such as New York or London or San Francisco, then there's a good chance if you see a Jehovah's Witness in the street that they are participating in the special metropolitan work. Now, to do this work, they need to fill in an application form, which we saw Haruka talking about. And what's fascinating about this application form is it asks questions such as the following. Have you been reproved by a judicial committee within the last 3 years? If so, when? Have you been reinstated by a judicial committee within the last 5 years? If so, when? And the argument I made at the time about this line of questioning is it kind of negates the whole principle of people having the slate wiped clean once they've gone through a disciplinary process. According to Watchtower doctrine, it should simply be a case of, well, I had this problem, but now the slate's washed clean. Now I have been forgiven. But it isn't as simple as that with Jehovah's Witnesses. Apparently there is this time scale. And if you're thinking about doing a particular avenue of service within this time scale, then there might be problems for you. I find that rather chilling, in fact. It seems to be taking things to an extreme.
We went to BSCC, Bible School for Christian Couples, in January of 2014. It definitely helped prepare us for everything that would come our way, the good and the bad. We were assigned to Jackson, Alabama. It was a great assignment. Within a very short time, we were asked to apply for LDC. We traveled quite a bit, looking at different assembly halls. And then the focus went more toward kingdom halls. Each field rep couple was assigned a state, and we were assigned the state of Louisiana. On a Sunday night, we had been invited to a dinner party, just a normal, went to bed at night. We basically woke up to a stroke. I walked over to him and I could see that something was wrong, and so I called 911. Once they assessed him, they brought me in, told me that they needed to life flight him to a larger hospital in New Orleans. Thankfully, though, they said if you're going to have a stroke, that this was the kind you'd want to have because it is fully recoverable. We made adjustments, we adapted so that we could continue in the assignment. Well, he went from being in a wheelchair to being on a walker, and then later he started using a cane. And then now he walks without assistance. It's not a pretty walk, but we're working on that.
She really has a durability that I think excels all. Just the way that she, no matter what situation, how stressful the circumstance may be, she understands it's necessary for her to continue forward.
I honestly don't have much to say on this because I don't really understand the point of it. I mean, we're dealing with a program item at the moment. Again, it's the Be a Courageous, and this one is dealing with marriage mates. So Be a Courageous Marriage Mate. We're being shown a Jehovah's Witness couple where the husband has a stroke, and thankfully it's not the worst kind of stroke that he could have. And together they muddle through and they get on with life. I don't understand how there's anything unique here. People have strokes all the time, whether they're Jehovah's Witnesses or not. So I don't understand what this says about the uniqueness or the benefits of being a Jehovah's Witness. It seems to be suggesting, rather arrogantly I would argue, that you can't deal with a stroke unless you follow the governing body and identify as a Jehovah's Witness.
When our little daughter Belen was nearly 3 years old, the doctors discovered that she had a brain tumor.
When her physical condition worsened, as a father, I had to make decisions on what kind of treatment she would receive to best take care of her. And that completely terrified me.
It was like having Goliath in front of me, and I felt desperate for a moment. I remember that inside, I shouted to Jehovah to help me.
Through that situation, I learned how to pray to Jehovah. And Jehovah never left me. Jehovah guided me. Jehovah helped me make good decisions.
Only through prayer did I understand that what we were facing was too much for us to handle alone. We needed Jehovah more than ever.
As a family, we focused on our spiritual routine. The key to not being afraid of these problems is to trust in the resurrection hope. My wife and I were determined to educate our girls with love. Also, in a way that they would truly get to know Jehovah as they grew up.
It was evident that we were leaning on Jehovah, and they did the same. Belen, when she was going through difficult circumstances, she would say to me, "Don't worry, Mom, I prayed to Jehovah already." It made me see that, okay, my daughter is seeing Jehovah so real. There were many moments where she strengthened me. And even though it's true that Belen fell asleep in death, for me, she came out victorious. Because I know she's going to open her eyes in the new world, and the four of us will be together again.
What we've just seen is, in my opinion, one of the most disturbing videos that's being shown on the Saturday. We have this story of a young girl called Belen who ends up dying of a brain tumour. And it amounts to using a tragedy as emotional leverage to manipulate people into being followers of Watchtower. And bear in mind, this seems to be quite a recent story, because in one of those photographs, it shows in the background the artwork for the 2016 Remain Loyal to Jehovah convention, which means that Belen died within the last 2 years, which for me gives this whole thing a little bit of a whiff of ambulance chasing. It's almost like Watchtower is leaping on these stories as soon as it can to again exploit tragedy in pursuit of its own agenda. Just imagine you're watching this as a parent who has themselves lost a child, and you're still going through the process of trying to figure out what's happened, of trying to grieve, and you're being told in this testimony the key to not being afraid of these problems is to trust in the resurrection hope. That's the message that the governing body has for parents in this situation. Oh, don't worry, because everything's going to be fixed in the resurrection. Oh, and by the way, you only get to benefit from the resurrection if you do what we tell you to do and be good, loyal witnesses in every aspect of your life. And of course, just one of the many areas in which Watchtower insists on controlling Jehovah's Witnesses is in that of medicine. And we don't fully know, or it's not clearly explained whether or not the prohibition on blood transfusions was a factor in what happened to Berlin. They did mention at one point, I think it was her father Juan, said, I had to make decisions on what kind of treatment she would receive to best take care of her. And whether blood was an issue or not, it almost feels as though that was inserted just to remind witnesses that they're not in full control of these situations. The governing body gets a say, Watchtower gets a say. It should be that the doctor has a say. The doctor says, well, this is the treatment that will best benefit your son or daughter, and the parents get to just say, well, in that case, let's do that. But for Jehovah's Witnesses, of course, it's never that simple. First and foremost, they have to be thinking, never mind whether this is going to save my life or not, is it acceptable according to my religion?
After attending the School for Kingdom Evangelizers, I received an assignment in another part of the country. It is an area where it is costly to live and the living expenses are high. I was worried about how it would turn out and if I would manage. Not too long thereafter, I found a small room I could rent. The housing conditions were not ideal, but it was okay. I also received a small cleaning job, but it was not quite enough for me to make both ends meet. I had to travel a long distance to get to work. I was tired constantly. So it was difficult to keep my focus on the ministry. I had some savings when I moved, but it started to shrink. My funds slowly dwindled. By coincidence, I saw a job advertisement. I handed in an application, and 1.5 hours later, they called me in for an interview. They felt bad because they could only offer me a part-time position. To compensate, they offered me a higher salary, which I didn't object to. At the same time as I found a job, a couple came to me in the Kingdom Hall and said they had found an apartment for me. So in a city where it is very difficult to find a place to live, I suddenly had a small and cozy apartment. Now everything has come together. This means that I can focus on my ministry and the congregation. Jehovah knows just what we need, and when we test him out, he will bless our efforts. I really feel safe leaving my life in his hands.
I love the part of this where Emma says, by coincidence, I saw a job advertisement. I don't think you can call it a coincidence if you're actually looking for a job, because the job you're in sucks. So probably you saw the job advertisement because you were looking for a job, which would not make it a coincidence. But I'm going to have to keep returning to this particular story. And you'll see why as this convention rebuttal progresses. Literally in the video before Emma's, we're told about a little girl called Berlin who dies from a brain tumour. So a child dying, and by the way, it's supposed to be something like 9 million children who die every year before they reach the age of 5. 9 million children are dying. And here we have this Jehovah's Witness pioneer in Sweden who needs a job and needs an apartment. And oh, look at how Jehovah's blessed me. Look at what Jehovah's done for me. If Jehovah has done that for you, Emma, then his priorities are woeful.
As a father, I never expected this to happen to my family. One day, my son came home from work and told me that he had committed a sin. I asked him if it was serious, and he said that it was. When my son confessed, I felt incredibly sad. This deep pain, because I really wasn't expecting this from him. I was very aware that the greatest love we should have should be for Jehovah. And that gave me the strength to encourage him to seek spiritual assistance. I said that the wise thing for him to do would be to seek Jehovah's help through the elders, to talk to them about it. Regardless of what would happen to my privileges, I knew there would be other consequences. I knew that no matter what, this was going to hurt my family. Later, I regained my privileges. As a father, I'm extremely happy to see my son serving Jehovah wholeheartedly alongside his wife, who's a pioneer. What matters most for us, as humans, is to make Jehovah's heart rejoice. And we've been richly blessed, and that means that all we went through was worth the effort. We're happy, we're glad to be serving Jehovah, and he has blessed us with wonderful privileges of service. As elders, we need to be courageous to stand up to difficult situations, knowing what is right. We know that Jehovah is aware and that he sees everything. We need to protect Jehovah's name, which is so important because of Satan's challenge against it.
This is just an extraordinary video. I don't think anyone deserves to have someone like Jose as a father, because apparently Jose is more interested in what will happen to his privileges than the prospect of being forced to shun his own son. He says at one point, the greatest love we have should be for Jehovah. And that's the attitude that Jehovah's Witness parents are supposed to have in this situation, where it's looking like their child is going to be disfellowshipped right off the bat before any decision's been made. No, the greatest love should be for Jehovah. I need to love Jehovah. In other words, Jehovah's organization. In other words, the faithful slave. In other words, the governing body, more than I love my own son. If that doesn't scream cult, I don't know what does.
I first learned about the Bible from a friend in my second year of high school. I became convinced that the Bible's record of Jehovah God's existence was the truth. So I decided I wanted to serve him for the rest of my life and decided not to go to college. My family was very angry with my decision, especially my uncle, who was a doctor. He burnt my clothes and my identification card, and then he beat me for many hours. I had no choice but to run away. I ended up in a city far away where I was able to find a kingdom hall. The brothers and sisters there showed me warm hospitality. I got baptized that year when I was 19. In January of 1971, my wife and I were assigned to the circuit work, and we were enjoying it, when unexpectedly my wife became seriously ill. She had to receive immediate medical attention. Eventually, due to her condition, we had to discontinue our service for a time. We are so grateful to Jehovah, who supported us in ways beyond our imagination during that difficult time. In March 2015, due to low blood pressure, I fell and hit my head in the parking lot of our apartment. Since we have no children, some might wonder who came to our aid. But when we arrived at the emergency room, brothers from many congregations were already there waiting for us, even before our ambulance arrived. We are still truly grateful for their support. We are convinced that Jehovah has always been with us these past decades, and we are certain that no matter what the situation, He will always protect us and guide us through any tribulation, any hardship, or any difficulty that may arise.
So this is just one of many examples in this convention alone of witnesses being shown what I like to call persecution porn. Watchtower needs witnesses to feel as though they're being oppressed by Satan's system of things, and to drive that message home in this particular story by Byung-woo, he describes how his father burns his clothes and his identity card because he refuses to go to college. Now, this is clearly irrational, ridiculous behaviour. It's not how you would react to someone who gets themselves embroiled in a cult. But it's worth dwelling on the fact, if you're approaching this as someone who doesn't know much about Jehovah's Witnesses, they do dissuade higher education. They do tell young witnesses not to go to college and university, and there you have an example of someone who becomes a Jehovah's Witness, and it's just understood, just as it was understood previously that, oh, I need to ditch my girlfriend, oh, I can't have a career in athletics anymore. Well, here again, well, I can't go through higher education. These are the kinds of restrictions that this organisation places on you. And the irony, of course, is that toward the end of the story, Byung-woo describes having this fall and he's rushed to the hospital, and Watchtower makes a big deal of the fact that, oh, well, all my brothers were there waiting for me. By the way, they wouldn't have been waiting for him if he were inactive or disfellowshipped, because this is conditional love. They have love for people who share their beliefs. But he's rushed to the emergency ward by people who did go through college. And he was likely operated on by people who did go through college. It makes no difference at all whether there were hundreds or thousands of witnesses waiting for him in the ER. What matters is that there were people there who saved his life, and they could only save his life because they went through college or university. But that was the last video of that particular symposium. We're now moving into the second symposium of Saturday morning, which has the theme, imitate not the cowards, but the courageous. And the first talk of this symposium has the theme, not the 10 chieftains, but Joshua and Caleb.
I thought we were going home, but everyone wanted to go to another gathering. I told them I had service plans the next morning. I was hoping to get this new Bible study going, and I needed some time to prepare. It didn't go over so well. They started pressuring me, saying, well, what if he's not there? Yeah, why go through all that work for nothing? It kept getting worse. Just skip it, they said. Come on, Tyler. Don't make us drive you all the way home first. Just come. Everyone was against me. I didn't know what to do. But then I remembered a family worship. We studied about Caleb. What gave him the courage to be different? Jehovah is with us, he said. That helped me to remember that Jehovah's with me too. I told them that the gathering sounded really fun, but if it meant missing my Bible study, it wasn't worth it. I told them I would find my own ride home.
So we're now into a series of dramatizations that are essentially telling young people not to be cowards and to be courageous. And the first example we're given is this extremely unlikely scenario. Honestly, I would love to know if anyone has been in a situation where their fellow Jehovah's Witness friends have been teasing them because they can't go to a second party and they want to make sure they have enough sleep for the Bible study tomorrow. This doesn't seem to me like anything that would actually happen. But even putting that to one side, what we have here, I believe, is Watchtower creating material that will go as far as to sow distrust between believers. So it's not just simply a case of, oh, well, Satan's world is out to get us, but don't worry, here in Jehovah's organization, you'll be safe, and everyone is on the same team, and we're all working toward the same goal. The message here seems to be, well, even in Jehovah's organization, there's probably going to be people who don't take it seriously enough. And if you get swept along by their peer pressure, well, you're a coward. You need to be courageous. You need to put service of Jehovah first wherever this becomes an issue. And that, I believe, is the overall message of what we've just seen.
Everything was going fine until Mr. Craig started talking about evolution. He said, the wide variations of living things on Earth are the result of the evolutionary process. All living creatures, including us, descended from a common ancestor. Most of the class agreed with him, but the other witnesses chose to stay quiet. I wanted to speak up, like Tyler did, but I was scared too. But then I remembered my Bible study. Last week we studied about jail. She probably felt scared too when facing the terrifying Sisera. But she used a tool she had to come to the assistance of Jehovah, and he blessed her for it. It made me think about, what tools do I have? I think there are good reasons to believe that God designed all living things. My phone contains a lot of information. My contacts, notes, emails, pictures, but it didn't come that way. I put it there. That's just a phone. What about the information for this plant? Where did it come from? I'm really glad I took a stand, and it even led to a good witness.
So incredibly, we're already being given in this convention the second video in which young Jehovah's Witnesses are told to resist being taught evolution. Bear in mind, this is only the Saturday morning. This is the second video of its type. On the Friday of the convention, which was the day before, you will remember that there was a testimony in which a girl describes getting up and correcting her class about the fact that evolution is a false teaching. And this is the sort of behaviour that's recommended in this particular symposium. Bear in mind, the title of the symposium is Imitate Not the Cowards, but the Courageous. So if you stay in your seat and you stay quiet and you fail to correct your teacher as a Jehovah's Witness, when he or she is trying to teach you evolution, you're being a coward. You ought to be courageous and you ought to speak up when you're being taught evolution. I just can't get over how arrogant this is. A child claiming to know more than their teacher based purely on the fact that they have been indoctrinated into a certain set of religious beliefs. And that's before we even get to how ridiculous this argument is that Watchtower is recommending young witnesses use when they make their brave stand in class. I've said it before, complexity simply isn't an argument against evolution when you understand evolution. Biologists have already explained how you can get something as complicated as an eye through natural selection. If a particular trait is advantageous to the survival of a particular species, nature has a way of making sure that that species will prosper and its near relatives who don't have that particular trait don't prosper. And I do understand that there are probably some people watching this video who do disagree with Jehovah's Witnesses and with the leadership, but perhaps you yourself class yourself as a creationist and you cannot fathom how life could evolve. But I would just ask you to honestly reflect on this. Which explanation for the variety of species on Earth today makes the most sense to you? The argument that they all popped into existence intact at some point in the distant past. So literally, 1 minute you're looking somewhere and 1 minute there isn't a kangaroo, and then boom, there's a kangaroo. And before you know it, you're surrounded by creatures popping into existence. Oh, squirrel, boom. Owl, boom. Mouse, boom. They're just popping into existence, which is what you have to believe if you believe in creationism. These things arrived intact at some point in the murky past. Does that make sense to you? Or does it make sense that these life forms developed from similar life forms due to a particular trait being more advantageous and better suited to the environment? And look, it could be that you find it more plausible that things did just pop into existence fully made. But even then, I just couldn't imagine teaching your children to stand up in class, to feel as though they're cowards if they don't stand up in class, and making them feel as though, no, you have to correct your teacher. You have to school your teacher on how life came about. That for me is just the height of arrogance.
Recently after school, I saw Tamiko give a good witness. She even started a Bible study. But not everyone was a fan, especially these kids. They saw me out preaching last week. They started saying things like, "No one wants to read your garbage. Why do you always push your ideas on people? Do your parents force you?" At that point, I would have given almost anything for them to leave me alone. But last week, we studied about the prophet Micaiah at family worship. He could have easily lied to the king, but instead he spoke the truth, and he made Jehovah's heart proud. I wanted to make Jehovah's heart proud too. Then I told them, "You want the truth? No one forces me to preach. I do it because I want to." Jehovah's Witnesses love people, and we want to share with them good news from the Bible. One of them said I gave the wrong answer, but I didn't think so.
Whether it's the right or wrong answer is debatable. He would obviously feel as though he's doing the preaching work because it's what he wants to do. He's not going to be thinking about the fact that he's been indoctrinated as a Jehovah's Witness from his very first memories, so it's not really a case of choice. He's doing what he's been programmed to do by his parents. But again, what this amounts to is persecution porn. It's witnesses being told to think that the world is out to get them, and particularly in the school setting, they're going to get aggravation, they're going to get bullying, purely based on the fact that they are Jehovah's Witnesses. And to a large extent, that's true. I can remember being bullied as a young Jehovah's Witness, and it did nothing but make me feel special, make me feel as though I must be in God's one and only true organization because it was prophesied that we would be persecuted. If the brothers in the Second World War in the concentration camps were persecuted, why should it be any different for me? It was validating. It really made me feel as though I was part of something special. And that's why, if you're watching this as someone who isn't a Jehovah's Witness, but you know of a Jehovah's Witness, either at school or at work, you should please, please, please not have this sort of conversation with them, or not belittle them, or mock them, or make them feel in any way as though they're being oppressed, because all it does is feed into the persecution complex that their faith requires in order for the theology to make sense.
Kevin and I were having a great morning. We met a lot of nice people. But then we saw those same kids from school. Kevin said that we should just leave and that we didn't need any trouble. At that point, I could feel my palms starting to sweat. But I knew I'd have to face them again. Then I thought about Jeremiah. I recently did some personal study on him. And when threatened, he bravely told his opposers, "I am in your hand." He stayed the course. I want to stay the course. They said, "We told you to stop forcing your stupid ideas on people." But I told them I wasn't going anywhere. Then he just laughed and said I wasn't worth it.
Two things here. You will have noticed the audience laughing when the preaching companion gets scared and runs away. That's just the way these videos have been recorded. We're getting some of the audience reaction. These aren't just clean videos that have been produced by Watchtower. We're also getting the audience's response. And probably some of the laughter will have been prompted by witnesses being in this situation when they're growing up. And it is terrifying. I can remember lots of instances on the door-to-door work where you have the nightmare scenario of a school friend coming to the door, and it's just, oh, you've got me, okay, let the mockery commence. But here, young Jehovah's Witnesses are being told to stay the course, and I just cannot help but see hypocrisy here, because the kid who's narrating refers to the example of Jeremiah, and he says, well, Jeremiah preached boldly and he didn't let anything stop him, so I'm going to do the same. But the hypocrisy is that Watchtower doesn't follow this example. Watchtower will act in a cowardly way when the beliefs are questioned, when they have an opportunity to present their beliefs to, for example, the media. I recently did a video called Lying for Jehovah, which has actually 2 examples in it. There's actually 4 examples of Watchtower representatives lying, but 2 of those examples from Finland are of Watchtower representatives lying to the media rather than face up to certain awkward truths about the Jehovah's Witness religion. For example, in one of the clips that I show, you see a Watchtower representative lying about the fact that people who leave Jehovah's Witnesses are shunned. And the argument I make in that video is that if you're going to be proud of your beliefs, if you're going to insist that shunning is a command from Jehovah, you should be proud of it. You should be saying, yes, this is exactly what we do, because we're Jehovah's one true organization and we keep our congregation clean, and that involves shunning. But it seems that when Watchtower is cornered by the media on these awkward issues that make them look like a cult, suddenly they're not quite so brave, and suddenly they do what we saw essentially in this video. They do run. And interestingly, there was an actual example of a governing body member running away from a journalist. If you look into what happened when the journalist Trey Bundy visited Brooklyn and saw Toni Morris.
Nobody else.
Howie and I are about 2 blocks from the main Watchtower building when he spots someone, a member of the governing body.
That's Toni Morris. Go get him.
Now, I've sat in Morris's lobby and called him at home, trying to ask him why his organization covers up child abuse.
Mr. Morris?
This guy's word is law to 8 million Jehovah's Witnesses, so it's weird to see him just walking down the street. He sees me coming and crosses the street to get away. When I catch up to him, I'm out of breath.
Mr. Morris? Excuse me, Mr. Morris?
I don't know you.
I know you don't. My name's Trey Bundy. I'm a reporter at the Center for Investigative Reporting.
Yeah.
I've been writing stories and producing radio stories this year about Jehovah's Witnesses and child sex abuse.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a second to talk to me?
Not really. I'm going out to preach the good news of the kingdom.
Okay. I saw that you...
He had just released a video where he blames child abuse on homosexuals. I asked him about that.
Can you talk to me about that at all?
It's all in the broadcast.
And with that, someone opens a door to a building a few feet away, and Morris rushes inside. After calling and emailing the governing body for months with no response, after reading through stacks of their documents, after flying from California to New York, I finally find one of these guys, and seconds later, he's gone.
So I just cannot help but see the hypocrisy here. The governing body are asking young Jehovah's Witnesses to have a courage and a bravery that they do not have themselves.
My boss called me into his office, and he offered me a promotion to a full-time position, which would mean a lot more money.
I was in a meeting at work, and they told me how much they appreciate me and my good work ethic. And then, suddenly, they offered me this full scholarship to start pursuing a career.
My uncle told me he'd back me financially if I ever wanted to stop working for him and start my own construction business.
A few weeks later, a brother was giving a talk at our circuit assembly. He read Mark 10:21, where Jesus told the rich young ruler,
One thing is missing about you. Go, sell what things you have and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven, and come be my follower. Then he made the point.
Instead of grabbing onto a rich spiritual opportunity, that young ruler just let it slide by. Then he asked us, is one thing missing from your life?
He was right. Something was missing.
I'm baptized, but am I really giving Jehovah my all?
Could I do it? Could I do more?
I was determined not to let a spiritual opportunity like full-time service pass me by. You need courage not only when things are bad,
but you also need it to pursue a life of self-sacrifice.
But when you do, you'll have no regrets, because nothing will ever be missing from your life.
This, of course, is a recurring theme in Watchtower propaganda. You have all of this material where young Jehovah's Witnesses are being manipulated into dedicating their lives in some form to serving Watchtower. In this case, you have these fictional young people who are being told, well, never mind this worldly career, never mind financial security for you and your family. What you really need to be thinking about is serving at Bethel, or serving where the need is greater, or doing international construction work. And it plays on this false dichotomy that's repeated in Watchtower material, where you're either serving Jehovah or you're serving riches. According to Watchtower material, if you're not fully backing Watchtower and fully dedicating yourself to the organisation, well, obviously you're obsessed with wealth and the pursuit of money and materialistic, futile things. This is not true. You can be a good person who looks out for people, who isn't obsessed with wealth, who cares for his family, who cares for his community, who wants to do what he can to better the human experience for other people without being obsessed with Watchtower and giving all of his or her life to serving the organisation. But how grotesque that Watchtower is using an opportunity like this, where it essentially has a captive audience of young people, many of whom will have been dragged there by their indoctrinated parents, and they're using this opportunity to drill home the message that if they really want to take things seriously, if they really want to guarantee their spot in paradise, they need to give everything to the governing body. But that brings us almost to the end of the Saturday morning programme. There is just one more talk, and it's the baptism talk, which has the theme, "We are not the sort who shrink back." And rather than play the talk for you, I just want to share with you a couple of experiences that were shared on the stage.
We have brother and sister, Brother Clegg and Sister Kennedy. They are from the Pine Bush congregation. Brother Clegg is serving as an elder there. He became a baptized witness at 40 years of age. So Brother Clegg, what tested your courage soon after you were baptized?
Well, my wife and I are both from big families, and family just meant everything to us. And not just us, but our 4 children also. And we expected opposition from her family because they were opposed to the truth. But we never dreamed that opposition would come from my family, because many of them were favorable to the truth. And although things did get better in time, there were years of separation and division. It was a very, very hard time.
So what helped you not to shrink back, Brother Clegg?
Well, I think the warning that Jesus gave in Matthew 10:36, he said that a man's enemies will be those of his own household. And so that helped us a lot. But especially in Mark 3:35, Jesus also received opposition from his family. And when that happened, Jesus looked to those around him, his disciples in the room. And he said, "This is my family, those that do the will of God." And you know, we've stuck to that down to this day. Our family are those that serve Jehovah. And what a beautiful family we've been blessed with.
How interesting. It seems that this experience has been included almost to give the impression that Jehovah's Witnesses aren't in the business of shunning people. If anything, they're the ones who are being shunned. Because you have here Brother Clegg, who's an elder, and he's describing how when he first became a witness, his family and indeed his wife's family were opposed. And he says that with his family, that resulted in years of division and separation. Isn't it interesting how it's a bad thing for there to be division and separation if it's because someone's become a Jehovah's Witness, but it's somehow not a bad thing for there to be division and separation if someone leaves Jehovah's Witnesses?
Thank you. And Sister Kennedy, she serves as a pioneer now. She got baptized at the age of 22, and you moved immediately because of your job situation, new congregation, everything, right after baptism. So, Sister Kennedy, what tested your courage soon after baptism?
Well, as you mentioned, the month I was baptized, I moved to a new state by myself. And so I felt like I needed attention, and I needed new friends in my new environment. I was often away from my new job as a flight attendant. I would travel abroad internationally for about half of each month. And while I was away serving passengers, I often came into contact with very flirtatious men who gave me unwanted attention and were very straightforward. So I didn't know how to conduct myself in this type of environment because sometimes I didn't want to feel flattered, but sometimes I was. And my crew members, they seemed to encourage it. It was almost like a game to see how many relationships they could develop abroad. So it really made me uncomfortable.
Wow. So how did you then, well, what kept you from shrinking back?
Well, Jehovah answered my prayers very quickly. Within the month, I talked to the elders and they arranged for a sister to study with me. That sister became like a mother to me. She made sure I knew what was going on with the congregation when I was away for work, and she was sure to invite me to be with her family often. So I felt like this was just what I needed to gain my footing in the organization, and they arranged for her to study the second book with me that was recommended for Bible studies.
Great. Well, we thank both of you very much. You've provided an excellent reminder to us.
Am I the only one who just doesn't understand what the point of that story was? I mean, we have here Sister Kennedy. First of all, I can't understand how it could be acceptable that she's a flight attendant. I mean, apparently she's pioneering, so probably during one half of the month she's working as a flight attendant, and the other half of the month she's working for Watchtower, and because she's doing that work for Watchtower, maybe that makes it okay. But if I'm thinking of a job that would be frowned on by Watchtower due to the reputation for, you know, relationships and that kind of thing, it would probably be being a flight attendant, but for some reason that's okay for her. And she describes what amounts to sexual harassment. She describes men coming on to her, and she says sometimes it was flattering, but other times it wasn't. What she is describing, if she's receiving unwanted attention, especially if it reaches a certain level, what she's describing is at least potentially sexual harassment. She goes to the organization, she goes to the elders for help, and the solution is, oh, we'll have a Bible study. She's already a baptized witness, and their solution to her having sexual harassment at work is, well, study the Bible more, that will fix things. I honestly don't understand the point of this story or how this in any way paints a marvelous image of Watchtower.
The lion's fearless reputation is well-founded. Lions are Africa's largest native cat. A full-grown male can weigh up to 230 kilograms, or about 500 pounds. Females are smaller, but can still weigh up to 180 kilograms, or nearly 400 pounds. Lions successfully hunt animals as large as buffaloes and hippos.
And now for something completely different. We've gone from sexual harassment to lions. This is actually part of we're now into the Saturday afternoon program, and we're in a symposium that has the theme Learn Courage from Creation. And this symposium goes through basically looking at animals and seeing what lessons can be learned from those animals. And the animals are lions, which we've just seen, horses, mongooses, hummingbirds, and elephants. Now, obviously, we're dealing with a lot of footage, a lot of video footage for each of those animals, and I've just selected a few clips rather than show you the whole thing, because it's not really that interesting and they don't really make any compelling arguments. They're literally just showing these animals. But I think it's problematic for a creationist religion like Watchtower to be focusing on the natural world in this way, because we just saw footage of, or it was described about how lions hunt. And of course, when you're a Jehovah's Witness, you're raised to believe that all animals in the Garden of Eden were herbivores. They didn't eat meat. And it's only since the fall, it's only since Adam and Eve sinned and everything apparently just went crazy that creatures like lions started eating meat. But obviously when you study lions, I mean, I don't know whether any of you have seen lions at the zoo. We have a zoo here in Zagreb, and it lets you go right into the lion enclosure. And last time Diana and I took Jessica, we went in and you're actually right next to where, like an indoor enclosure where the lions are, and they got into a fight. And it's one of the most terrifying experiences. You're literally just a few centimeters away from these massive creatures that are basically killing machines. But when you're a Jehovah's Witness, you're supposed to believe that in the new system, in the paradise, these creatures will forget that they're carnivores and they'll just eat plants.
Lion cubs face another danger. Groups of rival males will attempt to drive off the resident males and take over the pride. If the invading males are successful, they will try to kill the cubs that were fathered by other lions. The invading males can then father cubs of their own. On their own, the tiny cubs would be defenseless. But lions vigorously defend their cubs. Both males and females protect the pride from other lions. A mother lion will defend her cubs even though she may be injured or killed by a larger invading male.
How sweet, how endearing. So you have these lion cubs, and invading males can kill the lion cubs because they represent a threat to their power and authority, and father their own cubs. And this all apparently, because let's not forget, lions once popped into existence. There was once a time when there were no lions, and rather than lions evolving gradually from another cat species or from genetically almost identical predecessors, no, if you could go in a time machine far enough back in time and observe this piece of kind of grassy pasture, immediately a lion would pop into existence because it had just been created by God. And if you're a creationist, you might be saying, well, don't be silly, Lloyd. You're talking about things popping into existence. It probably would have been more gradual than that. Why would it be gradual? So paw, another paw. Oh, now 4 paws. Oh, now legs. I can't see why. If God's going to do something, he may as well do it instantaneously. I don't see why he would do it slowly. So the lion just pops into existence. And the lion has in its instinct this behavioural trait of tracking down, if it's a male, tracking down cubs that it hasn't fathered and killing them because it represents a threat to its authority. Okay, that makes total sense.
Despite its small size, the mongoose is in fact a bold predator. It feeds on various small creatures, but the most famous of its prey are venomous snakes, such as the king cobra. Several species of mongoose, including the Indian grey mongoose, are known for their ability to kill venomous snakes.
Of course, in the new system, snakes will no longer be venomous.
This fur serves as a protective layer to prevent a snake from biting into its flesh. However, if it is bitten, the mongoose has an internal defense mechanism, a tolerance to snake venom.
What's more likely, that Jehovah created mongooses with a tolerance to something that wasn't supposed to exist, like snake venom, or that this tolerance evolved by natural selection?
To the human eye, the beating of a hummingbird's wings is just a blur. Because its wing beat is so rapid, this tiny bird generates a humming noise as it flies. The smaller the hummingbird, the faster its wing beat. Larger hummingbirds beat their wings around 10 to 20 times per second. Smaller hummingbirds may beat their wings 70 or 80 times per second in normal flight.
Here's a fun fact about the hummingbird. The hummingbird and hawk moth are examples of convergent evolution. And I discovered this when I first moved to Croatia. I saw a hawk moth and immediately assumed it was a hummingbird because it looked, I mean, just looking at it, you're thinking, wow, I didn't realize they had hummingbirds in Croatia. And I actually emailed home, or I emailed to some friends of mine saying, you're never going to guess what I just saw. And pretty soon I got emails back saying that wasn't a hummingbird because they don't have hummingbirds in Europe. And I was like, oh, okay. And they said probably what you did see was a hawk moth. And the reason why hummingbirds and hawk moths look so similar is because they both need nectar. And they have both evolved the same method for getting that nectar, namely hovering in front of the flower and being able to feed in that way. So you just heard there that hummingbirds, smaller hummingbirds, have a wing beat of 70 to 80 per second. Hawk moths have evolved the ability to have a wing beat of 85 beats per second. It just so happens, and this is how evolution works, it just so happens that if there is an optimal way for a creature to feed or for a creature to survive, other creatures from entirely different species will figure out that same way of doing things. That's convergent evolution. But now it's time to move on to the final symposium from the Saturday, and it has the theme, How Our Brothers Are Showing Courage in, and then each symposium item has a different part of the world. And the first symposium item deals with Africa.
Before I came into the truth, my life was difficult. We were many women with one husband. My child had died. I got the truth through one older sister. She helped me understand what happens to people that die, including my son. I started attending the book study and came into the truth. During the course of this study, I learned that to really serve Jehovah, you cannot be part of a polygamous marriage. So I told him, staying in this situation is not in line with Jehovah's way. I have to leave. You already had a wife when I came to your house. So he said, how can you talk about leaving when you are pregnant with my child? The whole family needs to be involved in this. My family said, you have to call a village meeting. So they called everyone together. Everybody was upset with me. They said, but no one has done this before. You are the first. I said, it is not bad. I want to serve God. They gossiped a lot about me. They said, you are leaving, but you'll come back. You can't make it on your own. Just forget about her. So when I was leaving that day, I couldn't stop crying.
So there's a couple of interesting things about this story. We're introduced to this lady who was in a polygamous marriage. She ended up learning the truth from Jehovah's Witnesses, and then she felt compelled to leave the arrangement because Jehovah's Witnesses don't accept polygamous marriages. The first thing I wanted to highlight was the way she was recruited into the Witnesses. It was over the death of her son. And I've spoken about this at length. It's one of the most disgraceful ways that Witnesses recruit is by taking the grieving process and hijacking it for their own purposes. In my opinion, it's one of the most disgraceful features of Jehovah's Witness evangelism, and we see it celebrated in this video clip. And there's also, the second thing I noticed was the irony of this, because she wants to get out of this polygamous marriage, and the rest of the family say things to her like, you are leaving, but you'll come back. And she says, and they gossiped a lot about me. What does this remind you of? If, like me, you've managed to get out of Jehovah's Witnesses, does this sound at all familiar? I can absolutely relate to this, and it's just fascinating that Watchtower can't see the irony here, because this is exactly what happens when you leave Jehovah's Witnesses. People gossip about you. The grapevine goes into operation, and everyone starts gossiping about you because you're fair game, because you're no longer one of them. Not that witnesses don't gossip, even when you're a fellow believer, by the way. And you also have this manipulation to stay. Oh, well, where else would you go to? Jehovah's Witnesses even say, they invoke the verse that says, Lord, where else would we go to? You have sayings of everlasting life. There's this manipulation and coercion to remain in this toxic group and make people feel as though there's no way in the world that they could succeed outside of the group. So I just find it fascinating that Watchtower can't see the irony here.
Since my family shunned me, keeping in mind Joshua 24:15, I said, me and my children will serve Jehovah, and Jehovah will be with me wherever I go. I only packed a few personal items that I had. I left everything that was in the house. I left everything with them. We were affected by the war because while I was running away, one of my children got sick in my hands and died on the road. I had a basket for fishing that I bought. When fishing, I would sell some. Whatever I didn't sell, we ate. Sometimes I would ask my daughter, we are so poor, Zogo. Don't you want to go back to the village? She said, Mama, I can't go back. I want to serve Jehovah too. Jehovah blessed me. My daughter Zogbo got baptized and later served at Bethel. Jehovah also blessed me when I got married. Our son is now an unbaptized publisher, and my husband is an elder. 1 Peter 3:1 helped me to improve my conduct. It helped my first husband to serve Jehovah too. I have no regrets. I am now happy with my decision. I tell Jehovah, thank you. That is why no matter what it takes, I don't want to miss meetings. I always want to attend meetings with my brothers and sisters so that we can encourage one another.
Saber lists a number of blessings. She said, Jehovah bless me. I have a daughter at Bethel. I have a son who's an unbaptized publisher. And I ended up getting married and my husband's an elder. And these are all apparently blessings. But in the same story, she describes how having already lost a son, which again was used as leverage when she was being recruited into Jehovah's Witnesses, because they said, well, guess what? If you follow our religion, you'll see your son again. She then loses another child through disease when she's fleeing her polygamous marriage. I don't understand how you can then say, but hey, I got blessed because I got married to an elder and I have a daughter who's at Bethel. If Jehovah is orchestrating your life by making you get married to an elder or making your daughter into a Bethelite, why isn't he also saving your children from dying? Because you've lost two at this point. So how can you talk about Jehovah blessing you by intervening in your life in all of these trivial ways, when what matters most is your children surviving? And trust me, as a parent, that's your main priority, is the well-being of your children. It's amazing how when you are a witness, and I'm sure there will be witnesses nodding along to this thinking, oh yeah, she got blessed in the end. No, I'm sorry, that doesn't count. None of those things matter in relation to your children living. So either God intervenes or he doesn't. If he does intervene and you're claiming he intervenes, he has awful prioritization skills. And a point towards the end of her story where she talks about 1 Peter 3 verse 1.
1 Peter 3:1 helped me to improve my conduct. It helped my first husband to serve Jehovah too.
Now, maybe you don't know what 1 Peter 3 verse 1 is. If maybe you do, I'll refresh your memory. It's that verse that says, in the same way, you wives, be in subjection to your husbands, so that if any are not obedient to the word, they may be won without a word through the conduct of their wives. And I've actually done an article on Watchtower's use of this scripture, because it's actually very, very harmful the way this scripture is deployed by Watchtower. It's basically used to prop up a culture of the subjugation of women for one thing, and also domestic violence. So if you go to my article from 2011, one of my earliest ever articles on JW Survey, One Without a Word, At What Cost? In that article, I talk about the notorious Steve and Selma story that was featured in a 2012 Watchtower. Basically, Watchtower dreamt up this story of this woman named Selma, or maybe it was a real story, I don't have any way of knowing, but they described this woman named Selma who is having a Bible study and whose husband Steve is beating her. And the advice that she's given is to basically be a better wife. And 1 Peter 3 verse 1 is invoked. Oh, well, you need to win your husband over without a word by being a good Christian wife. That is deplorable advice to be giving to an abused, beaten woman. You need to be telling her to get out of that relationship. But Watchtower won't do that, or can't do that, because it has wedded itself to this idea that you can't have a divorce unless there is adultery. And they take that to the extreme of saying, it doesn't matter if your husband is beating you, you need to stay married to him. The best you can hope for is a separation, but you won't be scripturally free to remarry and go into another relationship unless one of you commits adultery. You're locked into this relationship for the rest of your life. You can imagine what that does to countless battered women. You're basically telling them that they are never free to move on with their lives, and that creates so much turmoil. And in my book, The Reluctant Apostate, I also deal with this issue of domestic violence among Jehovah's Witnesses, and I give a number of Watchtower articles going back decades where Watchtower has promoted this idea of it being the responsibility of the battered wife to win their husband over without a word. So if you're only just getting familiar with this side of Watchtower abuse, there's some references there that you may find helpful, but I just find it deplorable advice, and it's fascinating that Watchtower's managed to sneak it into this particular story.
I accepted the truth before my husband. His family members opposed me because I helped my husband to become a witness. That is why they never came to our aid when he was sick. My children and I took care of him on our own until his death. The chief asked me to perform some funeral rites. I explained that I could not perform those rites, so the chief banished me from the town, along with my family. So I informed the elders, and they consulted the branch. The case was reported to the police. One Tuesday morning, we heard a lot of noise coming from town, but did not know why. Soon the noise got louder, coming towards us. As the commotion reached us, my sister-in-law approached first, beating a tray with wood. She then told me to my face, "Agnes, you have caused disgrace. We have never heard anything like this before. Disgrace." Soon thereafter, we heard a knock-knock. 2 policemen had arrived. I couldn't flee from the situation because my fellow worshippers would face the same issue in the future. Therefore, I decided to stay and face it until the case was resolved.
Because she won't do some kind of funeral rite that's part of the local culture because of her beliefs, she ends up getting into trouble with the authorities who basically persecute her. What it's describing here is someone being oppressed because they have chosen to leave a certain group. And again, I can't understand why Watchtower can't see the irony here. They do exactly this to people like me, to others who simply can't bring themselves to believe anymore. They make life intolerable. They turn the rest of the family against them. They emotionally blackmail. How is this any different? Okay, there's not a mob beating pans or whatever, but there may as well be, and frankly I would rather deal with a mob beating pans than have to deal with the level of shunning that me and my family are being exposed to.
When our case was called up, my family members and I were present. I was allowed to tell my version of the matter, which I did. The inspector warned the chief seriously, reminding him that this matter is about an individual's human rights. The chief responded, "Okay, then she should not exchange greetings with me until my death." I thanked the officers and the chief for resolving the matter. What helped me to stand firm during the persecution was regular Bible reading, regularly attending Christian meetings, and completely relying on Jehovah. There are not many in the congregation who stay in town, but we have brothers from surrounding villages who, when they come to the meetings in town, come visit to encourage me after the meetings. Jehovah said that they will certainly fight against you, but they will not prevail against you, for I am with you. Since Jehovah was on my side, when they fought against me, they did not prevail. With Jehovah's help, they did not prevail.
So much hypocrisy here. Eventually, apparently, the police intervene in Agnes's case. They sit down, they speak to the chieftains or whatever, and they say it's Agnes's right to leave your tribe and to decide for herself what her beliefs are. You can't interfere with that. You can't punish her or persecute her for making that conscientious decision as to what she wants to believe and what she wants to do with her life. The police respect human rights. Watchtower is appealing to human rights in this story, but they don't apply those same human rights when it comes to their treatment of former believers. Now, though, it's time to move on to the next part of the symposium, which has the theme, How Our Brothers Are Showing Courage in Asia.
Since my dedication and baptism, I have been serving in a territory where our work is under ban.
When I was serving in the full-time ministry, I was assigned as a special pioneer to the territory where my future husband had been serving. Then we got married, and now we are sharing in this special avenue of service together.
We are persecuted, put on probation, and confronted by government officials. In difficult times, Jehovah personally assures me with the words from Isaiah, "I will fortify you. Yes, I will help you." The last time government officials came to our place, they took us to their office for questioning. They said they had no choice, and we went in their car. At that moment, I felt that Jehovah was not only giving me His Holy Spirit and wisdom, but also giving me the physical strength to go. I was so thankful to Him.
Indeed, on that day when we were taken in the car, I prayed to Jehovah, "Please help us to be able to give a witness about you."
A government official even said these words, "It's very interesting for us to talk with you. When we talk with people of other faiths, we never have our questions fully answered. But you know the correct answers to our questions and are capable of giving them."
Isaiah 31:5 is a big help, because there, Jehovah is described as being like swooping birds. After all, Jehovah is above me. In this verse, He also promises that He will defend and save.
So what we have here is yet more persecution porn. They are literally reenacting someone's story of being persecuted by the police. And this will have required, of course, Jehovah's Witnesses to dress up as police and get that car all looking as though it's a police car with the lights and everything. and show them banging on the door and leading these fellow Jehovah's Witnesses away. This shows perfectly how Watchtower leaps on persecution and craves it, in fact, in order for its theology to make sense.
Encounters with government officials and discussions with them have brought many blessings for our brothers, for our Bible students, and for us. But it has been a good opportunity for policemen too, because there are sincere ones among them who have a lot of questions. We have had good discussions, and I began to view them as my return visits.
We have shared with our students how Jehovah is giving us strength and how He is blessing us when we are talking with government officials. As a result, they were able to stay strong in the faith.
After meeting with police, we never sit at home trembling in fear. On the contrary, we try to share in field service with our brothers and sisters even more, because it's also an encouragement for them. We spend a lot of time sharing with them how Jehovah glorifies His name. In certain situations, through His words in the Psalms, Jehovah shows me that He is on my side, and I fully believe it. Jehovah indeed is on my side, and He has shown me that people can do nothing to me.
Here you have them talking about persecution and the authorities coming for Jehovah's people. Well, this is evidence that we're God's one and only true organisation, because in the time of the end, obviously, if we're Jesus' disciples, we can expect persecution. And in this story, they include indications that the police officers that they are speaking to, they've had some positive discussions with them. In other words, they've perhaps been able to preach to the officers who have been interrogating them. And this is evidence, of course, of Jehovah's blessing. So when the police are cruel and oppressive, well, they are fulfilling prophecy for these last days. And when the police are taking an interest in the message, well, this just shows Jehovah's blessing on the preaching work. Literally anything that happens, whether it's positive or negative, can be spun to make sense according to Watchtower's narrative.
We participated with the construction when the Kingdom Hall was built the first time. Everything was finished very nicely. Then we were involved in the construction of the same Kingdom Hall the second time. And when we were close to the end of the construction and came to the construction site and saw everything burned out and ruined, we cried.
So almost every day, unfriendly neighbors stopped us and continued to say to us, "Stop your work, go out from our village." In those moments, I just used to pray silently to Jehovah.
I was a bit afraid, since I had still fresh in my mind all the memory, the difficulties, and how the neighbors threw the stones at us. But the words in Isaiah 41 verse 10 gave me strength. Do not be afraid, for I am with you. Do not be anxious, for I am your God. I will fortify you. I will really hold on to you with my right hand. Reading these words always gave us power to continue our service.
I've obviously spoken at length on my channel about how opposed I am to persecuting Jehovah's Witnesses and to governmental bans against Jehovah's Witnesses, so I don't feel there's any need to go over all of the reasoning all over again, apart from saying that what I've said in the previous video for the Friday of the convention, that apart from anything else, banning and persecuting Jehovah's Witnesses doesn't stop them being Jehovah's Witnesses. Here you have a couple who are building a Kingdom Hall, the Kingdom Hall gets burned down, they build it again, it gets burned down, they build it again. You do not stop people from being in a cult just by opposing them, just by banning that cult, just by persecuting them and abusing them. This story just highlights for me that apart from that kind of behavior being cruel and abhorrent and in violation of people's right to believe what they want, ultimately it just doesn't achieve its aims.
I reflected on the words in Nehemiah 2:17. Come, let us rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, so that this disgrace will not continue. Jehovah wants this kingdom hall to be. This is important to the people there. So I wanted their praise for Jehovah again.
It was more than clear that Jehovah is backing us. We finished construction of that same kingdom hall the third time, from floor to the roof in 45 days. From human standpoint, this is not possible. We worked closer with many elders and ministerial servants. It was an enjoyable experience.
We felt Jehovah's hand. Jehovah strengthened our spirit. He encouraged us, and we felt that.
We cannot be silent. We have to praise God. We see Him, we know Him.
Jehovah poured out His Holy Spirit, and we gained confidence that Jehovah is always near and ready to help. He's like a loving father holding us at our hands.
Endurance helped us to receive all the blessing we are experiencing now.
I am very much grateful to Jehovah God for all these blessings. I realized more fully that for His name, Jehovah becomes anything He wants.
So at the third attempt, they managed to build the Kingdom Hall without it being burned down by the local thugs. And of course, they couldn't have achieved this without Jehovah's hand. This is something that we repeatedly hear in the JW broadcasting episodes and also in the convention videos. Fairly mundane, unimpressive achievements being lauded as impossible without Jehovah's direction. So it took them, I think, 45 days to build this Kingdom Hall, and they say in the video, from a human standpoint, this would have been impossible. Apparently, it's impossible to build a 2-story building in 45 days. I'm sure that if we put that to the test, under scientific conditions, we could prove that statement to be manifestly ludicrous. But even if we give them that, even if we say yes, it was clearly Jehovah's Spirit, it was Jehovah who made it so that this Kingdom Hall could finally be built at the third time of asking. He was blessing this project. He intervened in Kyrgyzstan and made sure that this Kingdom Hall could be built in this particular town or locality. What does that tell us about Jehovah? We've already heard in this convention the story of a child who died in the last 2 years from a brain tumor, despite being a loyal, believing Jehovah's Witness. Again, we don't know what role refusing blood had in her death. But what's the point of having buildings for Jehovah's Witnesses to meet in if Jehovah's not interested in keeping Jehovah's Witnesses alive, even the children? What kind of God is obsessed with building things and obsessed with things being constructed, but isn't so bothered about keeping people alive so that they can use those buildings?
I was born in the city of Gorlovka, in the east of Ukraine. Thinking about the day I was arrested, I did not think anything like that could happen to me. I was going to a field service meeting, but as I was passing the train station, I was asked by a military officer to show my documents. I showed my passport. Then suddenly he said, "Open your bag." In the bag I had my Bible and the Watchtower magazines. They arrested me not because my documents were missing. They simply said, Believer, you are our prisoner. Go to the basement. When I got there, the first thing I did was silently pray to Jehovah. This strengthened me a lot. The smell was terrible, dirty, smoky. It stunk. There was no space, not even if everybody lay on his side. Each day we were only given a few pieces of bread and water. One of the detainees started to incite everyone to escape. They took him out. And from behind the door, we could only hear the sound of the beating and his cries of pain. When he was led back, he was severely beaten. Of course, all became silent and nobody complained anymore. You could say that they kept us in a state of fear.
What's interesting here, apart from the ridiculousness of Jehovah's Witnesses dressing up as army officers and pretending to knock other Jehovah's Witnesses around, again, all for the purpose of a reenactment, and even having someone apparently beaten up with the makeup as though he's been really knocked around, all for the purpose of, again, creating this persecution porn that will really whip the Jehovah's Witness audience at conventions into a frenzy of paranoia and fear. Apart from all that, the thing with this story is Nikolai describes being randomly searched while he's going about his business and thrown into a basement, and apparently the people in the basement with him are not necessarily Jehovah's Witnesses. So it's not like just Jehovah's Witnesses, at least in this story, are being singled out for persecution. It appears that random people are in there as well. And in fact, as the story continues, he describes teaching someone in the basement to pray. So we know they're not Jehovah's Witnesses who are all huddled together in this basement. This is random oppression. This is random persecution. It isn't Jehovah's Witnesses being singled out for their faith. You do get oppressive, violent regimes that indiscriminately persecute people. I don't know how that proves that this is God's one and only true organization.
One detainee said, "I would like to address God, but I don't know how to pray." I volunteered and said, "I can pray." Then I sang Psalm 134.
Представь себя, представь меня, представь всех нас в новом мире, представь.
I preached a little to the detainees and to the guards. 10 days passed, and then I was released. They gave me my bag and said, "You're free now." When they were releasing me, one guard asked me to give him a magazine. I felt joy that even the situation I found myself in served for spreading the good news.
I sometimes feel guilty when I say Jehovah's Witnesses love being persecuted, because it isn't quite as simple as that. Obviously, when you're being persecuted, it's not a nice thing, and I can understand Jehovah's Witnesses watching thinking, well, that's not true at all. We hate persecution. But then you watch a video like this, where Nikolai is recounting the story with this massive grin on his face, and he's talking about being unfairly detained for 10 days. During which time he was mistreated, he wasn't fed enough, he was threatened, there was a fellow detainee being beaten up, and he's got this massive smile on his face. And frankly, this is showing, at least in one instance, a Jehovah's Witness loving the fact that he was persecuted. But when you look at the details of the story, at least as he's told it, this isn't a case of Jehovah's Witnesses being singled out because, again, the people who were in the basement weren't all Jehovah's Witnesses. This is random police or army brutality against civilians. It doesn't tell us anything about the uniqueness of Jehovah's Witnesses. And you also have this good things, bad things thing going on, where on the one hand it's, oh, well, I'm being persecuted for being a Jehovah's Witness, and this proves that my faith is true. And then towards the end of the story, he's saying, and then the soldiers were taking an interest and they were letting me preach to them, and they were wanting me to give them literature. So this also proves that my beliefs were true. They seriously want to have it both ways. Now, though, we're moving on in the symposium, and this time we're going to be shown examples of brothers showing courage in Europe.
A while ago, we were discussing politics in social science class. The teacher asked the class who we would vote for. I could see what was coming, so I offered a prayer to Jehovah, and then she also stopped at my desk. I simply answered that I don't vote. The teacher looked at me all surprised, but didn't really know what to say, so she just carried on. So I felt very relieved and happy because I'd said what I needed to say. But instead of leaving it at that, she came back and asked me why I don't vote. So I started to explain that governments will never bring lasting peace, no matter how sincerely they try, and that's when I told them about God's kingdom.
Yes, God's kingdom, which will bring lasting peace to the earth by killing billions of men, women and children who don't share Elise's religion. You see, sometimes global genocide is necessary to bring about peace.
Instead of being quiet, my classmates started asking question after question, like, so when will God's kingdom come then, and what is the kingdom? I'd never expected they would ask so many questions and be so interested, so that was a really nice surprise for me as well. And I was slightly starting to panic, for I wasn't sure what to say and how to explain it all properly. And all of a sudden the idea came to me to show the video. So, feeling a bit more confident, I told the class that I had a video that would exactly explain what God's kingdom is. All the students seemed enthusiastic and wanted to see it. So I got up and walked to the computer, but it wasn't working. I was so disappointed, for I really had the feeling, apparently I didn't know how, I found it hard to explain, but the video could, and now there was no way to show them.
Oh dear, Elise wanted to show her classmates a video, but due to technical reasons, the video wouldn't play. I guess Jehovah's hand must have been taking the afternoon off.
But some of my classmates didn't give up so easily. They asked me, isn't there another way we can still watch the video? For they had really become interested. So then I came up with the idea to add it to our school's group app for the class, and they liked it. So I did that. Almost at once, I received a reply from a student who wasn't in my social science class, asking, so when will God's kingdom come then? So here I am thinking, how should I respond? When before I could even reply, another girl, also not in my social science class, answers, well, you should have watched the whole video, for then you would have seen that you need to read the good news brochure. So in the end, I didn't have to say or do anything. People were responding for me. And later on, I also heard two girls talking about God's kingdom. Even though I'd never spoken to them about it, nor sent them anything, that was pretty special too. I wouldn't call myself a talkative person. When in a crowd, I prefer to stay in the background and not say too much. That is why I truly believe that Jehovah gives us courage. Because normally, I probably would never have stood up, but with Jehovah's help, I did.
A question is asked, so when will God's kingdom come then? Elise does not have an answer to that question, and neither do any Jehovah's Witnesses. When someone asks that question, they're asking for a date. They're asking for a year. They want to know literally when is God's kingdom going to come, Jehovah's Witnesses can't answer that question. And they certainly daren't put a date on it because their organisation has a ludicrous history of setting dates and then Armageddon failing to come on those dates. So we're left with, oh, well, we don't know exactly when the end's coming. We just know it's coming any moment now. And please just ignore the fact that my religion has a track record throughout history of claiming that Armageddon is going to come and Armageddon not actually coming. But now we're moving on in the symposium and looking at examples of courage in North America.
They said, you've got to go to Alaska. One of the greatest assignments you can be provided from the branch.
And then he popped up with a question. He says, have you ever thought of going to Alaska? And we said, well, should we? We definitely had to pray about it, scripturally look up some things, and we talked to 2 couples that we knew that had served in Alaska. You're assigned to the people, and if you focus on that, then you'll find joy in your assignment no matter where it is.
I do also like the spirit of Isaiah, where Jehovah asks, who shall I send? And without a hesitation, Isaiah pipes up, here I am, send me. He was just willing to be sent.
That's a scripture that's often read out when you are a Jehovah's Witness. The message being, you don't ask questions. If you're given an assignment by Jehovah's organization, you should just willingly accept it. It's a privilege. You should say, here I am, send me. But what's also interesting about this story is you have this couple talking about an assignment to go to Alaska as though it's this massive dilemma as to whether they should go or not. And oh, what a massive challenge. Listen, I've never been to Alaska. I believe it's very cold. I'm sure that there are massive challenges to living in Alaska, let alone, you know, going around and trying to persuade people to join your cult while you're in Alaska. I'm sure there are challenges. But we're talking about America. Alaska, as far as I know, is part of the United States. This couple is going from one part of their country to another. It's not like they're going to the other side of the world. It's not like they're going to one of the many countries where there are so few Jehovah's Witnesses that they may as well not be there. It's not like they're going to, for example, the Middle East or parts of North Africa, or parts of Asia where the work is under ban, or again, where there are no witnesses. How many witnesses are there in North Korea? How many witnesses are there in Somalia? Last I heard, there aren't any witnesses in those particular countries. Same with Afghanistan. Apparently there are some parts of the world, such as North America, such as Alaska, where Jehovah is more interested in drawing people to his one and only true organization. But when the paradise comes after the global genocide and everyone who's not been a Jehovah's Witness has been massacred, the earth will be disproportionately populated with people from countries like America, from indeed North and South America, from Europe, from Southern and Central Africa, from Australasia, from countries like Japan and Korea. Not so much all of those other countries, all of those vast portions of the planet where it actually is statistically impossible that you would be a Jehovah's Witness.
And then there was logistics of figuring out how to simplify and how to actually get up there. It definitely takes courage to take an assignment where you're out of your comfort zone. We might have needed some courage for the assignment that we took, but we were so impressed with the courage that the other brothers demonstrated. There were a total of 16 different special pioneers that were assigned, and 6 of them had never experienced a winter. And they're being sent into the harshest of climates, the harshest of winters in northern Alaska.
When we saw these young men, without hesitation, going to very unique places out of their comfort zone, it inspired us.
And it wasn't just harsh climate, but it was darkness, no congregation,
isolation,
none of their friends, none of the family there.
They would get a taxicab, drive them to the furthest part of their territory for that particular day, dropped them off, and then they would work from that location back to their hotel. I would say one of the blessings that we enjoyed was seeing how Jehovah opened up the language group. Jehovah chose the right ones to get the first tract translated into the Yupik language.
One of the sisters who was asked to translate was intimidated because she did not know how to read or write the language. Contemplating on Noah, it gave her the courage to fulfill her assignment because she, like Noah, did just so.
You know, the scripture that says the blessings of Jehovah, that is what makes rich. That is so true. We could have stayed in Jersey in our little apartment, maybe even by now have a comfortable living. But what really makes life living is the people and friends you have. As it was once said, you can't outgive Jehovah. If anyone is considering going through a door that Jehovah has opened up for them, don't hesitate. You've got the support of Jehovah, unseen angels, his spirit, and the brotherhood, and the blessings are just waiting for you.
What made me grimace was when Daniel said, what really makes life worth living is the people and friends you have. And he's saying those words in a propaganda video that is promoting an organization that breaks apart families as a means of isolating itself from criticism.
On one occasion, my son called me on the phone and said, "Dad, come quickly. They kidnapped John."
During the midweek meeting, 3 armed men showed up at the Kingdom Hall. They threatened to harm the brothers, their families, or the congregation unless they received a considerable sum of money.
I got to the Kingdom Hall, and when I opened the car door, a kidnapper was there waiting for me. They took me to an abandoned lot and left me there. But they took my car.
It's dangerous to preach in many parts of Mexico City, since we're in danger of being robbed at gunpoint. For instance, I once witnessed a shooting. My husband has been mugged. These kinds of things don't just happen in Mexico. They happen all over the world.
So now we have witnesses in Mexico describing how they're being kidnapped, how they're being burgled, how they're being threatened with violence by gangsters, and in the same convention we're shown a video of a Swedish pioneer who needs a job and somewhere nicer to live, and she gets blessed in that way. How can they not see the ridiculousness of it all? Why is it that Jehovah is giving this Swedish sister a new job and a new apartment, but he's allowing witnesses in Mexico to be burgled, to be threatened, to be kidnapped? What's Jehovah doing?
At the meetings, we had as many as 20 attendants at the doors of the Kingdom Hall so that the congregation would feel safe. When the meeting starts, the doors are closed, but we keep on the lookout. And if somebody wants to come in, we make sure that they will not pose a threat to the congregation. When we're preaching from house to house, we try to stay together as a group, and we're aware of our surroundings, watching out for any dangers.
We're always holding publications, like a magazine or a Bible. It helps us because people identify us as Jehovah's Witnesses. I try not to have any valuables on me, like a cell phone or jewelry.
It's a very productive territory, even if it is such a dangerous area. A lot of people are coming to know Jehovah.
While I was in the car with the kidnapper, he asked me what the difference is between Jehovah's Witnesses and Christians. I didn't know I would have the opportunity to preach, but I did. When life gives you lemons, you make lemonade.
Apparently, if someone's in the process of kidnapping you and stealing your car, and they start asking you questions about your religion, you should use that as an opportunity to preach.
I greatly admire the sisters that go out in service, the courage they show. Because even though their territories are difficult, dangerous, they will not give up in this important work. For them, giving up is not an option, and I will never give up either.
Crime happens and will continue to happen. But we're determined to serve Jehovah no matter what. We should not be afraid of those who kill the body.
If we were to face this situation again, the congregation would not stop preaching. They love Jehovah so much, and they truly understand that their neighbors are also suffering from crime. So they put forth much effort to share a message of hope.
No, I will not stop preaching. This work must go on, whether there's violence or not.
So in last year's 2017 convention, the theme was Don't Give Up. And in this video segment, we're being told giving up is not an option. Things are starting to sound more and more compulsory for witnesses. It isn't really their choice. It's not an option. You have to stay loyal, even to the extent of putting your life on the line. It sounds as though this particular part of Mexico is very dangerous, and there's a very real risk of witnesses basically losing their lives by indiscriminately calling on people's homes. But they're there being, well, the message seems to be, we should not be afraid of those who kill the body. And this, if you're a Jehovah's Witness who listens to those words, probably that means nothing if you've never been in the religion. But there's a song that's sung by witnesses, or at least it used to be sung by witnesses when I was one, where the lyrics go, "Fear not those who kill the body, but cannot destroy the soul." And the idea was, well, it doesn't matter if you die. This is, by the way, one of the most insidious elements of not just the witness religion, but lots of religions, the way it devalues life. So it doesn't matter if you die, whether by encountering someone who's violent on the ministry or by refusing a blood transfusion, because, hey, we're going to get resurrected in the future paradise. And these people can't destroy your soul, so you will be guaranteed a resurrection. So it really doesn't matter whether you die or not. What a flippant approach to life. But now it's time to move on to another part of the world in which Jehovah's Witnesses are showing courage, and that's Oceania.
Culture in my island is very strong. For example, the head of the family can choose the family's religion and also who they will marry. One day, many family members of a boy that my father wanted me to marry came to visit my father. The purpose was that they could request that we would be married. I respectfully explained that I could not do that, so my father started beating me. The first blow with the rod was very painful, but Jehovah helped me by moving Mama to act as if she would help him to beat me, but instead, she didn't actually beat me. For 6 months, he imprisoned me in the house, and he assigned me various hard jobs to do.
It's extremely hypocritical of Watchtower to be touching on domestic violence and portraying domestic violence in the context of non-believers when they have policies in place that put women in danger by keeping them locked in abusive relationships and unable to divorce a violently abusive spouse. This is extremely hypocritical.
The thing that was the most difficult for me was not being with the brothers and sisters doing spiritual activities for Jehovah. But what really strengthened me was the gift of prayer. I would pray constantly and talk to Jehovah through prayer. When I would do the meetings by myself, I would make a schedule on Saturday night. Then on Sunday, when all my family went to church, I would start by praying, singing, read the paragraph, raise my hand, and I would answer the questions myself. It was as if I was with my brothers and sisters at the meeting. Also, I would wait to see my younger cousins every Sunday as they walked by, because I knew they would visit my studies and return visits. I just went to the kitchen to wait. I waited for them and watched them go by, looking forward to being able to see them. Even though they didn't see me, only I saw them. And when they passed by, I saw that they went to preach where the Bible students were. I really felt strengthened, happy. During those trials I had to endure, there were times I was very scared, frightened. I really needed the courage that Jehovah supplies. That is why I begged Jehovah for courage. And immediately, Jehovah gave me courage so that I didn't have to be afraid anymore. I had peace, and I was able to endure those trials. By helping me to endure that test, Jehovah helped me to experience the blessings that I'm having today. Now, I am really happy.
While Ophelia is in one prison, she's craving to be in another. I'm sorry, that's all this story amounts to. She's in an abusive home. She's in a family that's dictating to her what sort of choices she should be making. And she's yearning to be in a religion that also controls you, through fear, I should add. Controls what kind of dress and grooming you have, controls what kind of entertainment you watch. Every facet of your life is controlled by the faithful slave when you're a Jehovah's Witness. So I don't see a huge difference in either predicament. At least in her family home, once she's old enough, presumably, she'll be able to fly the nest and make a life for herself where she can make her own decisions. She certainly won't be able to make her own decisions in the Jehovah's Witness religion, no matter how happy she claims to be.
In 2013, we decided to make a move from the United States to the Marshall Islands. We have a combined family of 9 children and 24 grandchildren. We had a middle-income family, and you have everything at your disposal. It was a big adjustment to move where we knew that we wouldn't have those conveniences.
Life here is very different from the United States. Many of the houses don't have kitchens or indoor bathrooms. And so even the house that we rented, there was no stove or refrigerator.
I was very apprehensive about making the move. It's a little bit harder for older ones to learn a new language. And so how would I be able to conduct Bible studies? How would I be able to, as an elder, to be able to help out within the congregation?
I had one study who had a really fierce dog, and I really didn't want to go back to that house. But I went back to have the Bible study, and I didn't see the dog. So I asked her, well, where is the dog? And she said, my uncle ate him.
Sometimes Jehovah's hand moves in mysterious ways. In this case, by arranging for a dog to be eaten.
At 2 Chronicles 15:7, it says that, do not be discouraged. There exists a reward for your activity. And so we busied and asserted ourselves in the work. And so immediately we had like 10 Bible studies in 2 weeks. But the benefit of that is we would go over maybe chapter 1 10 times. And so through repetition and through due diligence, it really facilitated us learning the language and being able to use it to study with people and help them to come to know Jehovah.
I'm a bit afraid of water. We're on an island. Here I'm surrounded by water and I cannot swim. Had a campaign recently to preach through the outer islands. So I have to think about the people. When I think about their desire to learn more about God, their love for God, their love and respect for the Bible, it really motivates me to keep going in spite of my fears. Yeah, you think about going from door to door and every person will stop what they're doing to talk to you about God. They'll accept the literature, they want Bible studies. It's really a pioneer's dream.
Their desire, their love for the truth and wanting to know about Jehovah, that's an additional blessing that has encouraged and strengthened us. She says it's a pioneer dream. I say it's a pioneer's paradise.
I just can't help but notice the irony here. This couple have moved to this country to try to persuade people who are living in paradise that actually, oh, there's this better paradise that we have that you can enjoy if you will join our religion. Actually, I think I would rather live in that paradise where they're preaching to people, because at least in that paradise there aren't billions of bodies under the lawn. You couldn't pay me to live in a paradise that has been built off the back of a global genocide, especially if living in that paradise is predicated on every morning, noon and night praising the monster who has annihilated all of these billions of men, women and children to make this paradise possible. And now we're entering the final part of the symposium, and we're going to see a few examples of courageous brothers who live in South America.
One afternoon as we were going to our meeting, I was robbed by a couple of thieves, young men. But right away, there at home, we realized that the best thing to do was to go to the meeting anyway. We just had to go to the meeting. It didn't make any sense to stay at home, crying and feeling all negative and frustrated.
Yes, according to this story, if you're on the way to the meeting and someone steals your car, you should press ahead and go to the meeting anyway.
At the Kingdom Hall, you feel refreshed. It's a safe place and you feel at peace.
Kingdom halls are apparently safe places, even though on this very day we've learned that they can be beset by mobs or even burned down.
Your thoughts calm down and those terrible feelings caused by being a victim of the bad things that happen in this system dissipate. This was the third vehicle I'd had as a taxi driver. It was a really big blow financially. The brothers found out that I'd lost my means of living. I no longer had an income, and while I was wondering what to do, they began to attend to each of our needs. David, my son, he left to go on a Bible study with another brother from the congregation. But less than half an hour later, I got a call from the brother who was with him. He gave me the terrible news that my son had been run over. Well, when we got to where he was being treated, there were many brothers there already. Many brothers. To this day, I can't figure out how they got there so quickly. Who called them? How they found out. Our son's accident was so distressing. Our hearts took a beating. As my heart was aching, it was as if Jehovah took my heart in his hand and caressed it. Don't you worry. Calm down. Everything will be all right. Just keep calm. You've suffered a test, but now you'll see my hand in this. I won't be coming down to be with you personally, but look at all that's happening.
If Jehovah did come down personally and I were in Brother Lugo's shoes, I would have some serious questions. Bear in mind, Brother Lugo has had his car stolen on the way to a meeting, and his car is also his livelihood, so he's not just losing his transportation, he's losing his job. And then a few months later, on the way to do the preaching work, his son is in a road traffic accident. All of this in the same convention that we're told about a pioneer sister in Sweden who all she needs to do is pray and she gets a new job and a new apartment. Apparently Jehovah, in the case of Brother Lugo, was asleep on the job.
And we saw Jehovah's power. I'm not saying that it was good that it happened, but it is important to see how Jehovah takes care of things. Not a year passed by between the theft of my car and my son's accident. The brothers were always there for us. A greeting, a hearty handshake, a meaningful, "We're right here, brother." And often there was something in that handshake. Money for things we needed at that moment. Thanks to Jehovah, my wife, my son, and me feel very happy, amazed by all the good things Jehovah does for us each day. I want to take hold of Jehovah's hand. I concentrate on that and pray every day to be able to cope with whatever problems arise. And another important thing, I know that I can count on my friends. I don't have to face things alone.
I honestly haven't learned anything from Brother Lugo's story. I knew already that bad things happen to Jehovah's Witnesses just the same as bad things happen to non-Jehovah's Witnesses. I knew that. And I also knew that Jehovah's Witnesses have conditional love for each other, so that as long as someone's a fellow believer, as a Jehovah's Witness, you will show sympathy and compassion and maybe even some generosity to them. The only thing I have learned is that Jehovah apparently supports some Jehovah's Witnesses materially, but not others.
I had a comfortable economic situation. For 20 years, I worked as the supervisor of a firm contracted by the oil industry. My family of 5, made up of my wife, my 3 daughters, and myself, never had to worry about food. One afternoon, as I watched the news on television, I learned that the company I worked for had come under new management. That Monday, when I went to work, I arrived at my office and found the new supervisor sitting in my chair that I had occupied for 20 years. I saw my resume in his hand. He congratulated me for being a hard worker who was honest and productive. But he said there was just one thing missing. I needed to join a political party. I replied as tactfully as I could that my wife and I were Jehovah's Witnesses and that we were neutral in political matters. The mood quickly deteriorated. Visibly angered, the supervisor's facial expression and tone of voice changed, and he threatened me, saying that if I did not join the political party, that would be my last day at work. I did not sign it or join the political party because that would be like committing adultery and keeping quiet about it. I would feel as if I had betrayed Jehovah.
Imagine being threatened with losing your job if you don't join a political party. That would be like being threatened with losing your life if you don't join a religion. Also, I love the fact that he refers to the potential of him joining this political party. He says it would be like committing adultery. I guess this guy hasn't heard about the adultery that Jehovah's organization committed when for 9 years they joined the United Nations as a non-governmental organization. And if you're a Jehovah's Witness watching this and you don't know what I'm talking about, check out this video and that should tell you everything you need to know.
I could have signed and kept my old job, but I knew my conscience would bother me for the rest of my life. I would never be able to go to the congregation and serve as an elder, knowing that I had let Jehovah down. Suddenly, I was unemployed. I lost 20 years of work and the severance and seniority pay I was due. My wife and my daughters were waiting for me. And right then and there, we prayed together and asked Jehovah to please provide for us, to please not let us be tempted beyond what we could bear. We knew we were facing a huge test, but that we would prevail because we had been obedient to Jehovah. Since losing my job, I've done several different odd jobs like gardening and painting houses, and at present I work with public transportation. My daughter, Genesaret, the second oldest, paints pictures and we sell them. My wife makes food and homemade sweets, and we have learned other skills as well. We have greatly simplified our life. My wife and I were even invited to Pioneer School in 2014. Our 2 older daughters auxiliary pioneer from time to time, and our youngest daughter, who is 13, was baptized. Jehovah has never let us down.
I don't think Jehovah let Francisco down. But on the other hand, I don't think Jehovah did anything for Francisco. In fact, I think that Jehovah was absent from the equation entirely. And as with all the other stories, all we're seeing is someone who, like anyone else, has bad things happen in his life and good things happen in his life. The only difference is he has been indoctrinated to view everything through the lens of his belief, so that when good things happen, well, this is proof that I'm being blessed by Jehovah. And when bad things happen, oh, well, this is a test of courage. This is a way for me to demonstrate my loyalty to Jehovah by sticking to my principles. The reality is, bad things happen to everyone. There are crappy people in the world who will throw you out of a job for not signing up to a political party. There are crappy people who will kidnap you or steal your car. And there are good people who will look out for you, who will fight for you and defend you if needs be. As I'm making this video, there was the story in Thailand of a football coach and 12 boys who got rescued from a cave in impossible conditions simply by the perseverance and goodness of non-Jehovah's Witnesses who didn't want them to die. But you don't hear about those sorts of stories, do you, at these conventions? Because that doesn't serve Watchtower's agenda. Watchtower needs Jehovah's Witnesses to feel oppressed and under siege and fearful and paranoid about everything outside their bubble. And unfortunately, just as we've seen in previous conventions, the Remain Loyal to Jehovah Convention 2016, the 2017 Don't Give Up Convention, the 2018 Be Courageous Convention is just following the same pattern of making Jehovah's Witnesses feel as though the world is out to get them and they need to stay loyal by serving Watchtower in whatever Watchtower tells them to do. But basically that's everything I've got for you as far as the Saturday of the Be Courageous convention is concerned. I will now turn my attention to my rebuttal for the Sunday, the final of the 3 days of the 2018 Be Courageous convention. In the meantime, I do hope you've enjoyed this video. Please don't forget to subscribe for more videos, and as always, thank you for watching.